The S&B cold air intake that we have here today would be an awesome choice for the 2019 and newer 5.3 Silverado owners who might be looking to go with one of the nicest sealed enclosure options available at a very attractive price point. Now, the S&B will feature a durable ABS plastic build along with their extendable dry filter and will not require the use of any custom or can tuning. Price point for the 5-star rated option will live in that low to mid $300 range. And the install, at least according to the site, is going to get a solid 1 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter. Maybe take an hour of your time at most to complete from start to finish. But as always, guys, hang with me for a bit and we'll cover that install later in the video. So I like to refer to intakes as one of those gateway modifications, if you will, that oftentimes gets truck owners more comfortable with modifying their own rigs. Now, not only is there an instant improvement in both appearance and performance, but the satisfaction of tackling something like this in the garage or driveway only builds confidence for the next round of modifications. Now, the S&B that we do have here on the table today is going to be one of the most popular in the category for the 5.3 trucks out there, with well over 100 5-star reviews. And as always, guys, I'm really going to encourage you, read up on some of those customer reviews if you haven't done so already. Check out some of the customer submitted images, as it's a great way to hear from fellow Silverado owners out there about running the S&B on their own truck and hearing from their experience. Now, as far as the major components are concerned, well, 2 biggies jump right out at me. First and foremost, guys, you're getting a sealed enclosure here, and one, by the way, that's been designed and built very, very well. Now, the sealed enclosures are always going to get a big thumbs up from me personally, as they're ultimately going to be your best bet at reducing high intake air temperatures, especially when the truck is stationary a lot. Now, when you're moving, obviously not a big deal, right? Because you're getting some fresh air through the front end of the truck. But if you're the type of owner who sits in a lot of traffic or you live in a very hot climate, this can definitely be a factor, and those high intake air temperatures can ultimately make the truck feel a little bit more sluggish. Now, that sealed enclosure does feature a pretty trick window to cover this area nice and clear so you can actually get a view of what's inside. And inside that sealed enclosure will be one of S&B's signature dry filters. And as you can see, man, this thing is absolutely giant. Easily one of the largest filters in the category. Now, as a general rule of thumb, for those of you who are interested, oiled filters might flow just a little bit better, whereas a dry filter will ultimately capture more dust and more particles. But that difference in performance is so minute that it really shouldn't be a huge concern either way, especially when we're talking about a sealed enclosure. Now, the good thing about a dry filter like this is that they don't require nearly as much maintenance as an oiled filter, but yet they still can be cleaned with some compressed air and reused over time. Now, as far as your benefits are concerned, well, a more modified underhood appearance is obviously a biggie, but also a slight bump in both horsepower and torque should be expected as well. Now, S&B doesn't give us any exact dyno numbers here, but they claim this intake will outperform or outflow the stock intake by over 50%, which should lead to some pretty solid gains for both horsepower and torque for 5.3 Silverado owners out there. Now, on top of that, other benefits include maybe improved throttle response for one, and in some rare cases, even improved miles per gallon or fuel economy. That is, if you can stay out of the pedal a little bit, because honestly, once you install something like this, the noise, the added growl from your 5.3 is so intoxicating that, heck, I don't blame you for flooring the truck a little bit more than you usually would. Now, the rest of the kit is pretty straightforward. We did already cover the filter and your enclosure, which, by the way, the filter is pre-installed for you. That's ready to go right out of the box. But you're also receiving a very nice and very large roto-molded plastic intake tube. I'm a big fan of the plastic tubes. They are less susceptible to heat soak. Again, going back to that heat is the enemy of performance statement. That certainly rings true here with the tube as well. You're also receiving some very nice gaskets, couplers, hardware. They even kick in a mass airflow extension harness for this kit, which is a very nice thing to note and ultimately will make the install that much easier. Now, speaking of that install, I do want to remind you guys, no tune required whatsoever here for the S&B. You can always install a tune if you'd like to ultimately maximize your performance of the truck and the intake combined. But if you wanted to bolt this thing up and go without anything else, well, you are certainly in luck. But speaking of that install, what do you say we segue into the job, show you what it takes to get the S&B in place on your newer Silverado at home. So without further ado, guys, check out our detailed walkthrough and tool breakdown now.
The tools used for this install are an impact driver, flat and Phillips head screwdrivers, a trim panel tool, a pair of cutters, 8, 10, and 13 millimeter sockets, T15 and 20 Torx bits, a 5/32 Allen, a 10 millimeter ratcheting wrench, a 19 millimeter wrench, and a ratchet. So the first step of this install is getting underneath the hood of our truck and disconnecting the negative battery terminal. Now I know a lot of you, myself included, have disregarded that kind of instruction in the past. However, the manufacturer does recommend disconnecting the negative battery terminal and leaving it disconnected for a minimum of 2 hours before getting started on this install to prevent a possible check engine light scenario. And I don't know about you, but I hate dealing with check engine lights. So I'm gonna take their word for it and I'm gonna unhook this first. So unhooking the battery negative is simple enough. I'm just gonna use a 10 millimeter socket on my impact driver, but a ratchet will work just as well. I'll unhook this battery negative terminal, set it aside, and then I can let the truck sit for 2 hours before I jump into the rest of this install. Next, using my T15 Torx socket, I'm gonna remove the 2 screws that secure the hood latch lever extension onto the hood lever. Now I'm going to take my trim panel removal tool and I'm going to pull all the clips that secure the upper rad cover down, and then I'll remove the rad cover. Now that I have that upper rad cover removed from the front of the truck, I can take my 13 millimeter socket on a ratchet and I'm going to remove the 2 bolts that secure this angled brace behind the grille. Once I have them out, I can set this aside. Next, once again using my clip removal tool or my panel trim tool, I'm going to remove the clip that secures the air inlet tube to the area behind the grille. And once I do that, I'm just going to disconnect the tube from the other side where it hooks into the air box. I don't need to remove it, but I do need to unhook it from the box. Next, I need to disconnect this large connector. Now, I don't mean unplug it, I just mean unhooking it from the boss that secures it to the airbox, and all I'm gonna do is just pull up and away to get this area here disconnected from the airbox. Now again with my trim removal tool, I'm going to remove the Christmas tree wire harness retainer that's here on the bottom of the airbox, and this just holds the wire harness for the plug that I unhooked from the airbox in the previous step. My next step is going to be unplugging the mass airflow sensor. To do that, I'm going to pull the red tab back and squeeze down the connector and unplug it. Now I'll need to remove the PCV line both from the intake plenum, first by pressing down on the tab that is on the plenum, and then I'll do the same on the engine side and remove the PCV line completely. I'm just about ready to remove my intake plenum completely from the engine bay. I'm going to use an 8 millimeter socket on my impact driver to loosen the clamp at the throttle body, and again on the clamp at the intake box. Now that you've got these 2 hose clamps loosened up, we can go ahead and disconnect our plenum tube from our airbox, and then twist it off the throttle body and remove the plenum. Now I'm going to take my 10mm socket and remove the 10mm nut that's here on this stud in the front of the airbox. Once I have that nut off, I can remove the airbox from the engine bay. I'll make sure to set this nut aside so that I can reuse it later. Now that I have my factory airbox removed from my truck, I have a little bit of assembly to do on my new airbox. I have a couple of rubber seals and some brackets to install with the hardware that's provided in the kit. And first thing I'm going to do is install this inlet tube seal around the bottom of the airbox. Starting with this rubber inlet seal here at the bottom, I'm just going to squeeze it together. There is a lip on the inside of this rubber ring, and I'm just going to slide that onto the ridge of the box and work its way around until I have it all seated in place. Next, I need to install this harness bracket here in this captured nut. I'm going to use the provided hardware and a 5/32 Allen socket to tighten it down. I've just flipped my airbox assembly over. The next thing I need to install here in this hole that's in the airbox is this panel grommet along with this machined aluminum standoff washer. Just like the rubber inlet ring, I'm going to work it around the ring or the ridge that's on this rubber grommet until it seats into place, and then I can install the aluminum washer into the middle. Next, I need to install what's called the silicone box plug into this large opening here on the airbox. And this actually can be installed in either direction from the inside or the out. It's just a matter of preference, but it installs the same way as all of the other rubber grommets on this box with a lip on the middle of it that lines up with the plastic ridge. Next, I need to install these rubber prong grommets onto the nubs here on the back of the airbox. And that will complete the airbox assembly. Still have a little bit left on the assembly process. Now I'm moving on to the intake tube itself, now that I've finished with the airbox. The first thing I'm going to do is remove my mass airflow sensor from my factory airbox. I'm going to use a T20 Torx bit and remove the 2 screws. Once I have those out, I can remove the mass airflow sensor and transfer it over to my new intake tube. I'm going to use the provided gasket and mounting bracket for the mass airflow sensor, and I'm just going to line them up with the screw holes, and then I can install my mass airflow sensor. Now keep in mind, you want the sensor element to be in line with the direction of airflow towards the engine, so the air filter is going to be over here working its way into the throttle body, and this is the direction I want my sensor to face. Then I can use the provided screws and get them started by hand, and I'll tighten those up with a Phillips head screwdriver. Give me a second, Ben, I gotta get a screwdriver. Now I can install the male quick connect fitting that's going to be our new PCV hookup. I'm just going to screw that into the captured threads that are in the intake tube, and I'll use my 19mm wrench to tighten it down. Now keep in mind, these are a tapered thread and it is a plastic fitting, so you don't need to go too crazy on tightening it. You just need to make sure that it is snug enough not to leak. My final preparation step before I jump into throwing this airbox assembly into my truck is assembling my new PCV line with the provided fittings, hose, and hose clamps that come with this kit. So all you'll have to do is slide your fittings into the new hose, slide your clamps over top of that, and then once you have those fittings into the hose, you can go ahead and tighten those clamps using a flathead screwdriver. So now I'm ready to install my new airbox into the truck. I'm going to align my little black alignment nubs towards the back of the engine on this black bracket here, right underneath the expansion tank for the cooling system. It's going to take a little bit of a wiggle to get this into place, but it should sit in there very nicely. I've got my airbox sitting in place, and now I can start my assembly to get everything finished and installed. So this harness bracket that we installed on the table is for this large connector, and you just line up the slots, slide that into place, and it'll hold itself there. And also you'll take that 10mm nut with the captured washer that we removed earlier and set aside for reinstallation, and that's actually going to go on the stud located inside the airbox now, and you'll need a 10mm ratcheting wrench to get it tight. Get it started as far as you can by hand, and then come back in with your ratchet wrench and fully tighten it down. The next thing I need to do for this installation is to reinstall my factory air inlet tube. Now, if you recall, while we were working on the table assembling the airbox, we installed a large rubber grommet at the bottom of the airbox, and that is for this tube that we are about to reinstall. Basically, you're just going to take one hand on the tube itself and use that to wiggle it around, while you take your other hand and put it into the bottom of the airbox and try to guide that pipe in through the rubber grommet until it reaches the stopping point. Once you have the tube aligned with the rubber grommet at the inlet, you can just push it in until the tube reaches the stopping point. And then we can reinstall the securing hardware. Now that we have the air inlet tube secured into the bottom of the airbox, we can go ahead and reinstall the clip we removed earlier that holds this to the rad support right underneath the grill, as well as the support bracket that is located just above the air inlet tube. I'll get those bolts started by hand, and then I'll go back with my 13mm socket on my ratchet and tighten them down. Next, we can reinstall our radiator cover and the clips that secure it down, followed by our hood release lever extension. We can slide our hood release lever extension into place, start the screws by hand, and tighten them down with our T15 Torx bit. I'm ready to install my new air intake tube. I'm just going to pre-install the provided coupler and clamps onto the end of the intake tube, and then I can attach that to my throttle body and then connect it to my new airbox. Once I have everything attached the way I want it, I can line up all my clamps, and I'll go through with my 8mm socket and tighten them down. This kit provides you with an extension for your mass airflow sensor connection. The reason being is your mass airflow sensor is now located closer to the throttle body, further away from the airbox where it was originally located. So basically you'll just plug this in and you'll route it along the back of the tube, and you'll see that there is a captured thread here in the back of the tube, and that's for the provided zip tie Christmas tree clips that they provide in the kit. I'm actually just going to start mine a couple of clicks, but just enough so that I can still pass my connector through it. And then I'll insert that into the threaded hole, pass my wire harness connection through there, over towards where it originally plugs in, and then I can pull that tight and secure it into place. Now that we're over here at our airbox, you'll see that there are 2 holes located on the side of the airbox, and those are for the Christmas tree retainer clips that are going to hold your wire harnesses in place. The bottom one is for the factory one that holds this harness for the large connector that hooks onto the side of the airbox. The upper one is going to be for the new location of your connector for your extension harness for your MAF sensor. So I'll just go ahead and push the lower one into place, that factory Christmas tree clip into the lower hole. And then doing the same exact thing I did before, I'll just get my zip tie started, a couple of clicks, pass my connector through it, install it into the side of the airbox, and then I can pull it tight. Once I've done that, I can plug in my MAF sensor. Don't forget to push the red locking tab back in place. Once I've got my wire harness routed and my zip ties pulled tight, I can go back with a pair of cutters and just snip off the excess. Next, we can install our newly assembled PCV line. The right angle connector is going to go onto the intake tube, and that should just click into place, and the straight connector will go onto the breather on the engine. Once again, clicking into place. Now we can install the plexiglass cover with the rubber grommet into the top of the airbox. Once our airbox assembly is in place and everything is connected, we can go ahead and reattach our negative battery terminal and tighten that down with our 10mm socket. The last step of this install is actually going to take place in the cab. These vehicles are equipped with an engine air filter life system that needs to be disabled now that you've installed your new cold air intake. Failure to do so will result in that light turning on the dash, and it can only be disabled by the dealership. I'm going to show you how to navigate through the driver information system to disable that in the menu options. With the truck started, you're going to scroll through to the settings menu. Once you're into the settings menu, you're going to go to Info Page Options. And once you've reached that drop-down menu, you're going to scroll until you find the air filter life, and then you're going to make sure that the green box is checked, and you're going to disable it. Then you can back out of the menu, back to your home screen, and you're good to go. And that's going to wrap up this review and install of the S&B cold air intake with dry extendable filter fitting your 2019 to 2022 5.3 liter Chevy Silverado 1500. Thanks for watching, and for all things Silverado, keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com.